The drumbeats of war against Iran are growing louder, echoing to the corridors of power in Washington, D.C., and across the media landscape. But what if the very conflict the United States seeks to avoid, an open-ended engagement in the Middle East, is precisely what its strategic rivals, China and Russia, are hoping for? This isn't just about regional stability. It's a grand chessboard, and a U.S.-Iran war could be the ultimate checkmate for Beijing and Moscow, shifting the global balance of power irrevocably. The implications extend far beyond the immediate battlefield, touching global energy markets, international alliances, and the very fabric of the post-Cold War order. As the West contemplates intervention, it must consider not just the cost of war, but who truly stands to gain from its prolonged agony. Iran, not your average adversary. A stark reality check for Washington. Let's be clear. Iran is not the Houthis in Yemen. It's not the Taliban in Afghanistan. And, of course, it's not Syria or Iraq. This isn't a conflict against a decentralized insurgency or a state crippled by years of conflict. Iran possesses a conventional military far more robust and organized than any of the aforementioned entities. With an estimated 610,000 active personnel and an additional 350,000 reserve and trained personnel, Iran boasts the largest military in the Middle East in terms of active troops. Their capabilities extend beyond sheer numbers. Iran has developed significant asymmetric warfare capabilities, including a formidable ballistic missile program, often described by the Pentagon as unrivaled in the Middle East, a growing drone program, and a sophisticated network of regional proxies. Unlike the largely defeated conventional armies of Iraq in 2003 or the fragmented forces in Syria, Iran has spent decades preparing for a potential conflict with the United States, developing deeply buried and hardened defense facilities, and refining tactics designed to inflict maximum attrition on an invading force. A war with Iran would not be a swift shock and awe campaign, but a grueling, multi-front engagement with significant human and material costs. Strategic distraction. Unleashing Russia's ambitions. Beyond economics, a U.S.-Iran war would serve as profound strategic distraction for Washington. Every military asset, every intelligence resource, and every diplomatic effort diverted to the Middle East is one less that can be focused on countering China's growing assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific or addressing Russia's expansionist policies in Eastern Europe. The U.S. military, already stretched by global commitments, would find its resources and attention heavily concentrated on a new front. This diversion would be particularly advantageous for Russia, which has consistently sought to undermine U.S. global leadership and fragment Western alliances. Moscow has already leveraged Western focus on Ukraine to pursue its own objectives. A new, protracted conflict for the U.S. in the Middle East would further alleviate pressure on Russia, allowing it to potentially increase its military activities in Ukraine, strengthen its hold over former Soviet republics, or even make more aggressive moves in the Arctic. Russia and Iran have a deepening strategic partnership, solidified by a long-delayed strategic cooperation agreement signed in January 2025. While this agreement does not constitute a mutual defense pact, Russia has consistently condemned Israeli strikes on Iran and warned the U.S. against military intervention. While direct military support might be limited, Russia could offer crucial intelligence, logistical, and diplomatic backing to Iran, effectively prolonging the conflict and bleeding U.S. resources. As Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova warned on June 19, 2025, any U.S. military intervention will be an extremely dangerous step with truly unpredictable negative consequences. From Moscow's perspective, a U.S.-Iran war offers a prime opportunity to exacerbate internal divisions within the U.S., erode American credibility on the world stage, and demonstrate the limitations of U.S. power. A weakened America, the erosion of global standing. The long-term effects of a protracted U.S.-Iran war would extend far beyond financial costs and military distractions. The continuous engagement in forever wars in the Middle East has already contributed to a sense of imperial overstretch and a decline in American prestige globally. Public trust in foreign interventions has plummeted, and the narrative of the U.S. as a reliable, consistent global leader has been challenged. A new, bloody entanglement would only amplify these concerns. The human cost, both for American service members and for the Iranian population, would be immense, leading to widespread anti-American sentiment and potentially fueling new cycles of extremism. Beijing's silent cheers, the economic and geopolitical dividend. For China, a protracted U.S. entanglement in Iran offers a multi-layered strategic windfall, even if it brings initial disruptions to oil flows. The primary benefit for Beijing would be the diversion of American military, economic, and diplomatic resources away from the Indo-Pacific and towards another Middle Eastern quagmire. The pivot to Asia, a cornerstone of recent U.S. foreign policy, would effectively be derailed. Each dollar spent, each troop deployed, and each diplomatic hour consumed in Iran is a dollar, troop, and hour not directed towards countering China's growing influence. In 2021, the Cost of War Project at Brown University estimated that the post-9/11 wars, primarily in Afghanistan and Iraq, had cost the U.S. over $8 trillion. A similar, or even greater, expenditure in Iran would further strain the U.S. economy, potentially hindering its ability to invest in critical domestic infrastructure and technological advancement, areas where China is rapidly closing the gap or even surpassing the U.S. Oil market manipulation and Russian synergy. While China imports nearly 90% of its oil to the Strait of Hormuz, an immediate disruption might be unwelcome. However, a prolonged conflict that drives up global oil prices would disproportionately benefit Russia, a major oil and gas exporter. This creates a fascinating dynamic for China. If Iranian oil supplies are severely curtailed, China could turn to Russia for increased energy imports, further solidifying the Sino-Russian energy axis. This increased demand for Russian oil could help Moscow weather Western sanctions, a win-win for their burgeoning strategic partnership. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, Iran produced approximately 4 million barrels of oil per day in 2023, with exports averaging 1.5 million barrels per day in 2024. A significant reduction in this supply, even if it accounts for just 3.6% of global volume as per 2024 data, could noticeably raise oil prices, boosting Russia's revenues. Opportunity in Taiwan? The most chilling, albeit speculative, benefit for China lies in a potential opening for Taiwan. If the U.S. military is deeply enmeshed in a costly, attritional war in Iran, its capacity and political will to respond effectively to a Chinese move on Taiwan would be severely diminished. Beijing would be closely observing U.S. resolve and capabilities. While China has much to lose from global economic instability, the long-term strategic gain of reclaiming Taiwan might outweigh the short-term economic turbulence. The outcome of a U.S. intervention in Iran could directly influence Beijing's assessment of American commitment to its allies in the Pacific. Soft power gains. As the U.S. once again plunges into a Middle Eastern conflict, China can continue to portray itself as a responsible global power focused on economic development and multilateralism. Its Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, with Iran as a vital land-based corridor connecting East Asia to Europe, offers a stark contrast to U.S. military interventions. While a conflict in Iran would disrupt BRI projects in the short term, China's long-game strategy would be to present itself as the builder and peacemaker, ultimately eroding U.S. influence and attracting more partners to its vision of a multipolar world. Iran's full membership in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, in 2023 further solidifies its strategic alignment with China and Russia, offering a platform for coordinated responses to regional challenges. The historical echoes, learning from past mistakes, history, as they say, often rhymes. The U.S. interventions in Afghanistan, lasting nearly 20 years and costing over $2 trillion before the Taliban retook control in 2021, and Iraq, which led to years of insurgency and destabilization after the initial invasion in 2003, offer stark lessons. In both cases, the initial military objectives were achieved relatively quickly, but the subsequent nation-building efforts and counterinsurgency operations proved to be immensely complex, costly, and ultimately unsuccessful in establishing lasting stability. Iran, with its larger population, approximately 89 million in 2024, sophisticated military, and deeply entrenched ideological leadership, presents a challenge orders of magnitude greater than these previous conflicts. A U.S. intervention would undoubtedly galvanize Iranian nationalistic sentiment, potentially unifying various factions against a common external enemy. As former U.S. officials have frequently noted, if the United States intervenes, China and Russia will try to prolong this war by a kind of support for Iran, to keep it alive, to fight, to prostrate the United States for another few years in the region at least. This is not an act of benevolence, but a calculated geopolitical move. By providing covert or overt support, ranging from intelligence sharing and military training to advanced weaponry, Beijing and Moscow could effectively turn Iran into a strategic sinkhole for American power and resources without directly engaging in hostilities themselves. This proxy prolongation strategy will be an ultimate win for their long-term objectives of eroding U.S. global dominance. The inevitable outcome, a weaker America, stronger rivals. In conclusion, the prospect of a U.S.-Iran war, while presented by some as a necessary measure to address immediate security concerns, carries with profound and far-reaching geopolitical implications. Such a conflict would not only be a drain on American resources, blood, and treasure, but it would also serve as a strategic boon for its primary rivals, China and Russia. They stand to gain immensely from a prolonged U.S. entanglement. A distracted America, an economically strained America, and an America whose global standing and credibility are further diminished. By supporting Iran in various ways, albeit short direct military intervention, Beijing and Moscow could ensure that the United States remains bogged down in a costly quagmire, thereby creating a vacuum that they would be all too eager to fill. The Iran trap isn't just a military scenario. It's a strategic chessboard where the ultimate victors might just be the very powers the U.S. seeks to contain. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but a reality that demands careful consideration before the first shot is fired. The economic drain, fueling the fire for Beijing's ascent. A large-scale, open-ended war in Iran would impose an astronomical economic burden on the United States. Consider the financial cost of previous U.S. interventions. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, for instance, collectively cost trillions of dollars. The Congressional Budget Office, CBO, and other independent analyses have repeatedly highlighted the immense financial strain of these prolonged engagements on the U.S. economy. For example, estimates suggest the post-9/11 wars cost the U.S. approximately $8 trillion by 2023, with significant portions attributed to sustained military operations and veteran care. A war with Iran, given its size and military capabilities, could easily surpass these figures. This massive expenditure would inevitably divert resources from critical domestic investments in infrastructure, education, and technological innovation, areas where China is rapidly gaining ground. While China is heavily reliant on Middle Eastern oil, with over half of its crude oil imports coming from the Persian Gulf in 2024, with significant, albeit unofficial, volumes coming from Iran, a regional conflict might cause short-term disruptions. However, Beijing has been actively building up its strategic oil reserves, refining less than it buys and produces to mitigate such shocks. Furthermore, rising global oil prices, an almost certain outcome of a major conflict in the Strait of Hormuz, through which approximately 20% of global oil production transits daily, would disproportionately benefit Russia, a major energy exporter, providing a much-needed boost to its budget. While China might face some immediate economic headwinds, a prolonged U.S. entanglement would ultimately weaken its primary geopolitical competitor, offering Beijing invaluable strategic breathing room to focus on its own economic development and Global Belt and Road Initiative, extending its influence across Eurasia and Africa.